In this video, I am going to share with you a step-by-step pattern of making this mesh stitch bucket hat that is perfect for the summer and a beach day outing. This is a beginner-friendly tutorial, so let's get started. Hey guys, welcome to DIY Crafts. For this project, I am using 6-ply medium weight 100% acrylic yarn as I love this denim color combination. However, I would suggest using a medium weight 100% cotton yarn since the project is made for the summers. And for the crochet hook, I am using a 4mm crochet hook. Now let's begin by making a slip knot. Make a circle with your finger as shown in the video. And now from the center, insert your crochet hook and pull up a loop. And now pull the starting tail end to make a slip knot. Pull the working end to adjust the loop. Now yarn over and make a chain. So that's chain 1, chain 2, chain 3 and chain 4. Once you have 4 chains, insert your needle into the bottom loop of the first chain as shown in the video. Now push both the loops on the hook close to each other. Now yarn over and draw the yarn through both the loops at a time, which means we have made a slip stitch in the bottom loop of the first chain, and this creates a small center. Now hold the center and let's start making the first row. Begin with chain 2, and every row this chain 2 is just a height chain and we are not counting this as a double crochet. Now yarn over, insert the hook into the center, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now you will have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, draw the yarn through first 2 loops on the hook. Now you have 2 more loops, yarn over and make a double crochet. So this double stitch will be the first stitch of my row 1. Now I am putting a stitch marker on top of this first stitch, and this helps us to count and also to guide us where we have to make a slip stitch once we are done with the first row. So that is your first DC. Now for the next DC, yarn over, insert the hook into the center, yarn over and pull up a loop. Again you will have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2 and yarn over, pull through next 2. That's your second double stitch, and we'll continue to make double crochet stitches in the center until we have 12 double stitches. So now we are making the third double crochet. So that's 3. Let's keep a count and continue making it. That's the 4th double stitch, 5, 6th one, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and last one, that's the 12th double stitch. So this one will give you the first row of double stitch with 12 double crochet stitches. You can just check the count, and once it is done, you can remove the stitch marker and identify the stitch from where you are removing the stitch marker. So remove the stitch marker, hold the stitch with your left hand, then that helps to identify the stitch. Now put your needle into that stitch. And we are going to make a slip stitch to join these 2 sides. So yarn over and draw the yarn through all the loops on the hook. And this closes the first row. And it will give you a small button kind of look. Now let's do the second row. Begin with chain 2. We will ignore this chain 2 as a stitch. And now let's start making the actual double crochet stitches for our second row. Identify the first stitch. Yarn over, insert the needle into both front and back loops of your first stitch. So usually it looks on top of the first DC. So we are making the first DC on the top of the previous first DC. So that's the first double crochet on the first stitch. So this is the first stitch of our second row. So I'm marking this stitch with a stitch marker. Now into the same stitch, I'm making one more double crochet. So again into the same stitch, that's another DC, which means we have made a DC increase in the first stitch. So DC increase means making 2 double crochet stitches into the same stitch. And now we will do the double crochet increase in the next stitch as well. Identify the second stitch, and into that I'm making the first double stitch. So that's the first DC in the second stitch. Again yarn over, into the same stitch I'm making another double crochet. So that's 2 stitches in the same stitch, which means a DC increase in the second stitch. And again I'm making another DC increase in the third stitch. So that's the first DC, and into the same stitch where we have done the first DC, into the same stitch I'm making another DC. That's a DC increase in the third stitch. And likewise I have to make DC increases in each and every stitch throughout the row until you reach the starting point, or until you complete all the 12 stitches. So here I have reached the last stitch of my second row. So I'm making the last increase, that is the 12th increase. And this completes the second row. Let us check the count. Let me show you how to check the count of each and every row. So the stitch marker will help you to identify the first stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 and 24. So as we have 12 stitches in row 1, we will have 24 stitches in row 2. Once the second row is completed, identify the stitch where we have put a stitch marker and insert the hook into that stitch. Okay, you can remove the stitch marker and put it for an easy access. So remove the stitch marker, and into the same stitch you put your crochet hook and make a slip stitch, which means yarn over and draw the yarn through all the loops on your hook. That is your second row. And now let's start making the third row. Begin with chain 2. Again we are going to ignore this chain 2 as a stitch, and then we are going to start by making a double crochet on top of the first stitch. So that's the first double crochet in the third row, and again to mark the first stitch I'm putting a stitch marker on top of the first stitch. So that's one single stitch in the first stitch, and now in the next stitch we are going to make a DC increase. Remember, we have made only one DC in the first stitch and we are making a DC increase in the second stitch. So this is the pattern for third row. So 1 DC and 1 DC increase in the next stitch. So that pattern we have to repeat it for 12 times. So here I'm doing it for the second repetition, that is 1 DC, and now in the next stitch I will make a DC increase, that is 2 double stitches in the same stitch. So this completed the second repetition, like 1 stitch and 1 DC increase. So that's the second repetition, and now I'm doing the third repetition. So 1 DC, in the next stitch a DC increase, that is 2 DCs in the same stitch. Likewise we will continue to make 1 DC and 1 increase, and we have to repeat it a total of 12 times throughout the row until you complete 12 repetitions, which means once you are done with all the 12 repetitions you will see a stitch marker in the next stitch, which means you have completed 36 double stitches. So here I am making the last 12th repetition of my third row. So that's 1 DC and then 1 increase. So once you have done with the 12 repetitions, just check the counting here, and now if the count is 36 stitches, then you have done it correct. You will leave the slip stitch there. That is the slip stitches which we do not count and which we will not calculate it as a stitch. Now remove the stitch marker, and onto the first stitch we will make a slip stitch, and as I said, You have to check the counting after completing each and every row to make sure that you are following the pattern and the count correctly. Now insert it on the top of your first stitch and make a slip stitch. This completes the third row, and this looks like a little dome shaped circle which will even out eventually once you have done the 7th row, like until the 7th row. And also the starting tail end, we will finish it by the end of the project. Now let's start making the 4th row. Begin with chain 2, and let's start by making 1 double stitch in the first stitch, and then we'll put a stitch marker on top of this first DC to mark the beginning of the 4th row. So for the 4th row, the pattern is 2 DC and 1 increase. As we have already completed 1 DC, now we are making another DC in the next stitch. That is 2 DCs, which means 2 separate DCs, and then DC increase, which means 2 double crochet stitches in the same stitch. So if 2 DC is a normal instruction, we have to do them separately, like 1 DC in each stitch of the next 2 stitches, and then a DC increase means 2 DCs in the same stitch. And this set of instructions we have to repeat it for 12 times, and now I am doing it for the second repetition. So that's 2 DC, and in the next stitch I am making a DC increase. That's 2 double crochet stitches into the same stitch, 2 DC and increase. And now we will repeat this pattern throughout the row for the 3rd repetition, 4th repetition, and like that until the 12th repetition, until you reach the starting point. So here we have already completed 2 DCs. I am making the last increase of the 12th repetition, and this completes the 4th row with 48 double crochet stitches. You can check the counting once you are done with the 4th row. Like, make sure that you have got the correct number of double stitches, and then remove the stitch marker. Again we will mark the we will do the slip stitch to close the 4th row. So remove the stitch marker, check for the count before you do the slip stitch. Remove the stitch marker, insert your hook into the first stitch and make a slip stitch, and that's the 4th row. Now let's start making the 5th row. Begin with height chain of chain 2 and ignore that chain 2. And now for the 5th row, we have to make 3 double stitches and then a 1 increase. So that's the first DC. Put a stitch marker to mark the beginning of the 5th row. So that's the first DC. And now in the next stitch, make 1 DC. So that's the second DC. And in the later stitch, make 1 more DC. That's the 3rd one. So 1, 2 and 3 DCs. And now in the next stitch, make a DC increase. That's 2 DCs into the same stitch. And now for this row, we are going to repeat the pattern of 3 DC and increase for 12 times. So this is the first repetition. That's 3 DC 1 increase is the first repetition. And now we are doing it for the second repetition. That's 1, 2, 3. That's 3 DCs, and now in the next stitch we make a increase. That's 2 double stitches made into the same stitch. So this completes the second repetition, 3 DC and increase. And now continue this pattern throughout the row until you have 12 repetitions, and you will get to see the starting stitch after completing the 5th row. And now after 5th row we will have 60 double stitches. Now I am going to check the crown width of the circle. So let me take the tape measure, and I am going to measure the diameter of the circle across the center. So this one is approximately 5 inches. However, for my cap I need it approximately until the 6 inches. So I will keep on adding the rows until I have the crown width of 6 inches. So now let's continue. Remove the stitch marker. Make a slip stitch on top of the first stitch. Again, begin with chain 2 for the 6th row. Now for the 6th row, the pattern is 4 DC and 1 increase. So let us start by making first DC in the first stitch and put a stitch marker on top of the first stitch. So that's the first DC. And now make 1 DC in the next stitch. So that's the second one. That's the third DC. And then the fourth DC. So 4 DCs. And now in the next stitch, we are making a DC increase. So this is the pattern for your 6th row, which means 4 DC and 1 increase, and we are going to repeat this pattern throughout the row for 12 times until you get the starting point. Now I am doing it the second repetition, so that's 1 DC, 2, 3, 4, and then in the next stitch there is an increase. So that's the end of the second repetition, and we are going to continue this pattern throughout the row, like 4 DC and 1 increase, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and likewise until you get to the starting point. And now we have completed the 6th row, and the count will be 72 double stitches. Remove the stitch marker and make a slip stitch, and this is how your 6th row looks like. As I said, as we have keep on doing adding the rows, the shape will eventually flatten out. Now for the 7th row, begin with chain 2, and for the 7th row the pattern is 5 DC and 1 increase. So we'll begin with 1 DC, put the stitch marker to mark the beginning of the 7th row, and now that's first DC, we have to make 5 DCs. So let's continue. That's the second DC. This is the third one, 4, and we have to make 1 more DC. That's the 5th DC. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now in the next stitch we are going to make a increase. So for the 7th row, we have to repeat this pattern of 5 DC and increase throughout the row. So that's the first repetition in our in the 7th row. And let's continue for the next repetition. Now that's the second DC, 3, 4, and 5. And now in the next stitch, make a DC increase. That's 2 DCs worked into the same stitch. So this completed the second repetition. You can check the count. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and increase. So likewise, we will repeat this pattern throughout the row until you have 12 repetitions, and by the time of 12 repetitions are completed, you will reach to the first place. And now this is the circle after completing the 7 rows. I'm making the last increase of the 7th row. That's 5 DC and increase. Now remove the stitch marker and let's make a slip stitch. Yarn over and make a slip stitch. And now here let us check for the crown width again. So I'm just quickly grabbing my measuring tape, and if I measure it, it was approximately 6.5 inches. So this will actually fit my head, and you can adjust the crown circle according to your head crown width. And now let's continue to the height rows of our cap. So for that I'm using a mesh work or the mesh stitch. So again I will begin with a chain 2, and instead of putting my hook into the entire stitch, I will put my hook only into the back loop to make a double crochet. So this is the first double crochet of 8th row, and then put a stitch marker on top of the first DC. So that is the first double stitch. And now for the mesh pattern, make chain 1, skip 1 chain or skip 1 stitch, and in the later stitch we will make 1 more double crochet, again only into the back loop. I hope that is clear. So basically in the 8th row we are creating a mesh stitch pattern using a double crochet and a chain 1 stitches. So make 1 double stitches in the back loop followed by a chain 1, skip 1 stitch and make another double crochet in the later stitch. So chain 1, skip 1 stitch, and in the later stitch make 1 DC into the back loop of the stitch. And we are going to repeat this pattern throughout the row until you reach the starting point. So again chain 1, skip the next stitch, and in the later stitch make a DC in the back loop. And this will create you a nice edging or the border for your cap, and also it will start giving you the nice mesh texture for the cap. And now let's continue this throughout the row until the starting point, or until you reach the last stitch there. So here I'm making a chain 1, skip the next chain, and in the later stitch into the back loop make a double stitch and then chain 1. So this have come to the starting point. Remove the stitch marker, insert your hook on top of the first stitch and make a slip stitch. And now if you count the double crochet stitches, you will get 42 DCs. As we have skipped the middle stitches, like we have alternatively made the double stitches, the count will come by half, but the circumference will remain the same as we have used a chain 1 stitches. And now we have to alternate the double stitches and the gaps, which means on top of a DC I wanted a gap, and on top of a gap I wanted a DC. So for that I'm making a slip stitch into the chain 1 space. So we have one slip stitch to close the row and another slip stitch to go to the chain 1 space. And now chain 2 and make one double crochet into the chain 1 space. I see where I have put the needle and making a DC. So that is the beginning of the 9th row, and I'm putting a stitch marker on top of this first stitch again to identify the first stitch. And now chain 1, skip the DC and make a DC on top of into the next chain 1 space. So here what happens is we have a chain 1 gap on top of a DC, and we have a DC on top of a chain 1 gap. So it will give you a alternative boxes kind of structure for the cap. And now we are going to repeat this pattern of 1 DC, chain 1, skip the DC and put a needle, make a DC in the next chain 1 gap, again chain 1 and 1 DC in the next chain 1 space. Repeat this pattern throughout the row until you come to the starting point, like the last DC in the last chain 1 space. After that we will make a slip stitch and then we'll go to the next row. So here I have come to the last chain 1 space. I'm making a DC in the last chain 1 and then chain 1, and now we are going to make a slip stitch on top of the first stitch. So remove the stitch marker and make a slip stitch, and this completes the 9th row again with 42 stitches. And now we'll make another slip stitch into the next chain 1 space. So which means we are actually repeating the pattern of row 9 for your row 10 also. So from row 10 until row 14 I'm going to repeat the same pattern as in the 9th row. So I'll begin with a chain 2, make 1 DC in the chain 1 space, put a stitch marker, and then I'll continue with the mesh pattern, which is nothing but DC, chain 1, DC in the next chain 1 space, again chain 1, another DC in the next chain 1 space, again a chain 1, and then this pattern repeats or continues until row 14. So we'll continue this, and until row 14 each row will have same 42 double crochet stitches with chain 1 gaps in between. So here I'm making the last chain 1 and then a slip stitch of the 14th row, and if you see there is a nice mesh stitch pattern for the height rows of my beanie. And now if I measure the height of the cap from the center point till the last row, so here it is 6 inches and it is good enough height for my cap. And now I am turning the cap into a bucket hat from the next row. So I have made a slip stitch into the next chain 1 gap, begin with a height chain of chain 2, again we are ignoring this chain 2, and now into this chain 1 gap make 3 double crochet stitches. So that's 3 DCs in the first stitch. And I forgot to tell you, if you wanted to add a more height for your cap, you can always add more number of mesh rows to your project. And once you have got the desired height of your cap, then you can start making it like a bucket hat following the pattern from row 15 as I have shown you here. So here in row 15 I am making 3 double crochet stitches in each chain 1 gap. So that's 1, 2 and 3. So all 3 DCs worked into the same chain 1 gap, and I'm going to continue this until the starting point. So 3 DCs in each chain 1 gap, it will give you 126 double crochet stitches by the end of the 15th row. So here I have done with the last 3 stitches in the last chain 1 space, and now remove the stitch marker and make a slip stitch, and this completes the 15th row. Now let's start making the 16th row. Begin with chain 2 and make 1 DC on top of the first stitch and put a stitch marker. Now for the 16th row I am going to use a pattern of 5 DC and increase. So that's 1 DC, and then the second one, third DC, 4 and 5. So you can check the count through 3, 4 and 5. And now in the next stitch make a DC increase, that is 2 DCs into the same stitch. And now we are going to repeat this pattern of 5 DC and increase throughout the row for 21 repetitions. So let's continue. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So by now I think you are able to identify the stitches, and that's the reason I am making it a little fast. But however, if you are not sure, you can always turn down the settings to you can reduce the speed settings, and then you can follow the video accordingly. Okay, so here I am making the 21st repetition of 5 DC and the last increase. And now I am going to make a slip stitch to close the row, and by the end of the row 16 we'll have 147 double crochet stitches. And if you see the shape, it will slightly take you to the ripple shape, and that shape will be good enough for us to give the the shape of the bucket hat. And now for the row 17, begin with chain 2 and make 1 DC in the first stitch and put a stitch marker on top of the first stitch, and this marks the beginning of the 17th row. And now let's continue to make 1 double crochet stitch in each and every stitch. So for this row there is no increase and no any other pattern. We'll just make 1 DC on top of each and every stitch in the previous row, and this helps us to have a steady increase, and it helps to hold the shape even more better. And continue this throughout the row until you reach to the starting stitch, and by the end of the 17th row also we will have 147 double crochet stitches, as we are not doing any increases. Once all the 147 stitches are done, remove the stitch marker, make a slip stitch to join the row. And now let's start making 18th row. For that I am using a simple slip stitches. So insert into the next stitch and make a slip stitch. So actually in the last row we are creating a slip stitch border for the cap, and this slip stitch border helps us to have a stiffer edging for the bucket hat, and this stiffening helps us to hold the shape better, and hence it is perfect for the summer cap. And we are going to repeat this pattern throughout the row, which means we will have 147 slip stitches once you are done with the entire row. Once it is done, I am making the last slip stitch into the first stitch, then chain 1 and then trim the excess thread, leaving a tail end of 2 to 3 inches. And now pull out the loop on your hook completely and fasten off. So this completed the beanie. Now we are going to do the finishings. For this, insert the tail end into the tapestry needle and hide the tail end towards, take the tail end to the back side and hide it across a couple of stitches in the nearby stitches, and make sure the tail end is nicely weaved into the stitches. And once it is done, you can trim and remove the excess thread close to the project. Now I'm going to repeat the same thing with the starting tail end as well. Carefully weave in and trim the excess thread close to the project. Now it's time to decorate the cap. You can use any flowers like daisies, sunflower, roses, etc. But out of all the options, I have liked the sunflower better. The color just balances everything. And also it's a summer cap, so sunflower is most suitable flower. So first I'm attaching this sunflower using a glue. If not, you can just attach it with a piece of yarn as well. So let it dry, and after that I am adding a small foundation chain across the the 14th line of the mesh work as shown in the video, and this helps us to adjust the brim if it is any loose, and also it kinds of adding a border or highlight to the cap. So just one line of foundation chain, and I am weaving in and out through the last row of the mesh work as shown in the video, and I'm going to repeat it along the way until I get it to the same stitch where I got it from, or in the next stitch, nearby stitch. And now I'm going to make a little bow and make sure this one comes onto the back side of the cap. And with that, our cute mesh stitch sunflower bucket hat is now ready. I hope you all enjoyed watching this tutorial. Do give this pattern a try and let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. The written pattern is given in the description. Do check it out. Make one for yourself and don't forget to share your work to me on Instagram. See you all in the next video. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, share it and subscribe to DIY Crafts.